Chicago train immolation. The attack on Bethany Maji. 2025. On the night of November 17, 2025, the Chicago Transit Authority Blue Line carried dozens of passengers through downtown Chicago, most of them tired, distracted, and focused on getting home. Among them was 26-year-old Bethany Maji, an ordinary commuter ending an ordinary day. Nothing about that evening suggested it would become one of the most horrifying crimes Chicago would see that year. Just before 9:30 p.m., as the train moved through the loop, a man later identified as Lawrence Reed stood inside the same car as Bethany. Surveillance footage would later show him watching her for several moments. Without any arguments, warnings, or visible interaction, Reed approached her from behind holding a plastic bottle filled with gasoline. In a sudden and deliberate act, Reed poured the gasoline over Bethany's head and upper body. Witnesses later told investigators there was a brief moment of confusion as passengers tried to process what they were seeing. Some thought it was a prank. Others froze, unsure of how to react. Bethany stood up and tried to move away, realizing something was very wrong. Reed followed her. As Bethany attempted to escape toward the front of the train car, Reed ignited the gasoline. Flames erupted instantly, engulfing her clothing, her hair, and much of her body. Screams filled the train car as passengers scrambled away, some pulling out phones to call for help, others desperately searching for something to extinguish the fire. Bethany collapsed to the floor, rolling and screaming as the flames continued to burn. The fire spread rapidly, fueled by the gasoline, and the heat filled the enclosed space of the train car. For those inside, the attack lasted less than a minute. For Bethany, it was a nightmare that would change her life forever. The train pulled into the Clark and Lake Station, where Bethany managed to stumble out onto the platform while still on fire. Bystanders rushed toward her, using jackets, bags, and their hands to smother the flames. Emergency responders arrived quickly, and Bethany was rushed to the hospital in critical condition with severe burns to her face, torso, and arms. Meanwhile, Lawrence Reed walked away from the scene. Police launched an immediate manhunt, reviewing surveillance footage from the train, station, and surrounding areas. The next day, Reed was taken into custody. Investigators soon uncovered a disturbing history. Reed had been arrested dozens of times over the years for various offenses, including violent crimes. At the time of the attack, he was reportedly under court-ordered supervision related to prior cases. As authorities pieced together what happened, one detail became painfully clear. Bethany and Reed did not know each other. There was no relationship, no prior contact, and no personal motive. Bethany was targeted at random. The case quickly escalated from a local crime to a national headline. Federal prosecutors stepped in and charged Reed with terrorism against a mass transportation system, a rare charge typically reserved for acts meant to instill fear in the public. Prosecutors argued that setting a stranger on fire aboard a crowded train met that standard. As Bethany remained hospitalized, undergoing multiple surgeries and intensive care, public reaction intensified. Chicago residents expressed outrage and fear, questioning how someone with such an extensive criminal history was able to roam public transit freely. City officials faced scrutiny over public safety, court supervision policies, and the limits of electronic monitoring. Fundraisers were launched to help Bethany cover mounting medical costs. Her family released statements thanking strangers who had risked their own safety to save her life on the train platform. Doctors described her survival as remarkable, while also warning that her recovery would be long, painful, and uncertain. In court, Reed pleaded not guilty. Defense attorneys signaled they would examine his mental state, while prosecutors prepared a case built on video evidence, witness testimony, and the sheer brutality of the attack. The case moved slowly through the federal system, drawing continued media attention. For many, the crime symbolized deeper fears about random violence in public spaces. It forced uncomfortable conversations about safety on mass transit, repeat offenders, and how communities balance justice with prevention. Bethany Maji survived an attack few people ever do. While scars from that night will remain with her forever, so will the memory of strangers who stepped in when she needed help most. Her case stands as one of the most shocking and disturbing crimes of 2025. Not because of who she was, but because of how suddenly and senselessly her life was nearly taken. And for Chicago, the Blue Line ride on November 17, 2025, became a reminder that danger can arrive without warning. And that courage can too. In the days following the attack, investigators worked around the clock to understand how such a brutal act could happen in the middle of a crowded train car. Surveillance footage from inside the CTA Blue Line became the foundation of the case. Cameras captured the moment Lawrence Reed approached Bethany Maji, the pouring of gasoline, and the ignition of the fire. The video was so disturbing that prosecutors later restricted its public release. Citing its graphic nature, detectives interviewed dozens of passengers who had been on the train that night. Many described feeling frozen, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing until the flames erupted. Several riders said the smell of gasoline lingered in the air seconds before the fire, but no one had enough time to react. Others recalled Reed's calm demeanor, noting that he did not shout, threaten, or speak before the attack. As the investigation deepened, attention turned to Reed's background. Court records revealed a long and troubling criminal history stretching back years. He had been arrested repeatedly for violent offenses, property crimes, and arson-related incidents. At the time of the attack, Reed was reportedly under court supervision for prior charges, reigniting public debate about repeat offenders and pretrial release policies. Federal authorities stepped in quickly. Prosecutors announced they would pursue terrorism charges, arguing that the attack was designed to spread fear among the public by targeting a random individual on mass transportation. Legal experts noted that such charges were rare, but not unprecedented, especially when violence occurred in spaces meant to serve the public safely. Reed appeared in federal court days later, shackled and silent. He entered a plea of not guilty. His defense attorneys suggested that mental illness might play a role in their strategy, though no official evaluation results were released at that time. The judge ordered Reed held without bail, citing the extreme danger he posed to the community. While the legal process unfolded, Bethany Maji remained hospitalized. Doctors described her condition as critical but stable. She underwent multiple surgeries, including skin grafts, as medical teams worked to manage infections and minimize permanent damage. Burn specialists warned that recovery would take years, not months. Bethany's family stayed largely out of the spotlight, releasing only brief statements through their attorney. They thanked the strangers who had helped save her life and asked the public for privacy as she focused on healing. Fundraising campaigns raised tens of thousands of dollars to support her medical care and long-term rehabilitation. Public reaction across Chicago was intense. Riders reported feeling anxious on trains, especially at night. Transit police increased patrols, and CTA officials announced safety reviews. Though critics argued the changes were not enough, community leaders demanded accountability, questioning how warning signs in Reed's past had been missed. As weeks turned into months, the case continued to move slowly through the federal system. Prosecutors compiled evidence, including forensic analysis of the gasoline container, clothing fibers, and digital records placing Reed on the train. Witness testimony was carefully documented, though many passengers said reliving the incident was emotionally overwhelming. Legal analysts predicted the trial would be lengthy and emotionally charged. If convicted on terrorism charges, Reed could face life in prison. The case also raised complex questions about intent, mental health, and the limits of the justice system's ability to prevent unpredictable violence. For Bethany, recovery became its own battle. Physical therapy, reconstructive surgeries, and emotional trauma became part of daily life. Those close to her described her as determined, even as she faced pain few could imagine. Doctors emphasized that survival alone was extraordinary given the severity of the attack. By the end of 2025, the Chicago train immolation case stood as one of the year's most disturbing crimes. It was not driven by robbery, revenge, or personal conflict. It was an act of sudden, random violence that shattered the illusion of safety in a shared public space. The Blue Line trains continued to run. Passengers still boarded every day. But for many, the memory of that November night lingered. A reminder of how quickly normal life can turn into horror, and how survival can sometimes depend on the courage of strangers. As the court case moved forward and Bethany continued her long recovery, one truth remained clear. The fire on that train did not just scar one woman. It left a permanent mark on a city,